I'm just gonna say it. I'm lazy. I'm sorry, there are no special fancy graphics for this prediction video. I have decided I'm gonna be going back to Tapology. The reason being is just truly I am kind of lazy, but also with the Contender Series coming up and I've started researching for the Contender Series, I've got my week 1 predictions out for the first week of the Contender Series already. And I just think that now that Contender Series is coming up, it's going to take up a bit of my time. We're going back to Tapology. That is that. Now, UFC 318, of course, is going to be headlined by the final fight of Dustin Poirier's career. I would argue this is actually Dustin Poirier's retirement card because they've come to Louisiana for Dustin Poirier to retire pretty much. You know, like this is kind of like Poirier's sort of state. Like Louisiana is represented by Dustin Poirier in the UFC is what I'm trying to say. And it's a good fight. You know, Max Holloway's fun. Dustin Poirier's fun. If they do stand and bang, it's going to be a good fight. Now, the supporting cast of fights, name value-wise, pretty weak. You know, I do think that this pay-per-view main card is a very weak pay-per-view main card. You've got to remember, I think they're charging $85 for these right now. I know some people that are paying $85 a week in rent right now. That is crazy that this is the main card you're getting. But once again, lack of name value, but a lot of striking matchups, a lot of fun matchups. The featured prelim is also epic. I do think that there's a lot of good fights on here though. Now, of course, if you did want to support my Turkish touch-up endeavors, please do subscribe to my channel. I'm nearly at 10,000 subscribers. I'm not going to be able to get a Turkish touch-up with only 9,000 subscribers. We need to get that 10k, and maybe then we can sort something out up top. And aside from that, of course, if you did want to support me and We Want Picks, and you wanted to get a 10% discount, you can use my code ARTEM. Last week, the boys did pretty well. I believe Jacob hit some pretty big parlays, finishing on Derek Lewis, so that was pretty epic for him. And then, of course, Conservative Ange actually hit on quite a few underdogs. And then, unfortunately, actually, it was the safety parlay that didn't hit of anything else. But he hit everything else aside from the safety parlay. And then, of course, BetSam, not on Team Tougher Gang. It seems like Tougher Gang is not the team to be on. And of course, he was picking Tuko Tokos there. So he got one up on me on that one there. Unfortunately, it just does seem like the Tougher brothers do not train Jiu-Jitsu whatsoever. It is quite sad because I honestly feel like if they had better takedown defense, they would be pretty good, like pretty dangerous, honestly. But anyways, let's get into the first fight of this card. There's 14 fights. I'm going to try and speed through some of the earlier ones, including this fight. I'm going with the underdog here. I am picking Nicolle Caliari. Now, is it a super confident pick? No. Do I like Carli Judice a lot? Yes, because I think she's super, super fun at 125 pounds. You know, she did have that banger on the Contender Series, or she lost it, I forgot, against Agnieszka Karakate, who actually beat Nicolle Caliari, if you wanted to MMA math it out. But she did knock out Eunice Dubin. And honestly, Eunice Dubin, I feel like they're just going to get rid of her pretty soon, because they are sacrificing her to the Machine 2.0, Kennedy Freeman, and Kennedy Freeman's UFC debut. So, rest in peace to Dubin, I'll just say it right now. Judice, I just not sure how good her takedown defense is going to be. And Nicolle Caliari attempted 14 takedowns against Agnieszka Karakate. Caliari looked good in the grappling against Corinne Laframboise, who I do believe is a BJJ black belt, and she submitted her. I can trust the fact that Caliari is going to grapple against the striker. So for that reason, let's go with Caliari. Let's go with Caliari decision as a pretty big underdog. Brunno Ferreira is going to knock out Jackson McVey, in my opinion. Now, McVey's fun. The thing about McVey is I think that he's like Zachary Reese in a lot of ways. He's also 6'4". He's also got a lot of first-round finishes. He can also strike. He can grapple as well. But the level of competition, just like it was for Zachary Reese coming into the UFC, isn't super high level. And he is looking very good while he does dominate these guys. Now, I actually was going to pick him to beat Christopher Hewitt and Cedric Dumas, but I think against Brunno Ferreira, stylistically, it's not good for McVey. McVey is a Muay Thai striker, very upright sort of stance. He has his chin up in the air quite a bit. I think Brunno Ferreira, if he does anything well, aside from his judo background, it is hit hard, it is boxed with a lot of power. I do think that Brunno Ferreira is going to get a Brazilian TKO in this fight. You see what I did there? I'm picking Brunno Ferreira by knockout. He's minus 600, but I think that's how he gets it done. Ryan Spann versus Lukasz Brzeski. Now, I would be lying to you guys if I said that I was confident in Ryan Spann, because as embarrassing as it is to admit, I actually was going into tape study trying to find a reason to pick Lukasz Brzeski because I just think Ryan Spann is terrible. I just do. Like, I'm so done picking Ryan Spann. Like, I'm just, like, he's one of those fighters which I've come out here, I've sat in this chair and I've said I'm never going to pick him to win a fight again because of the amount of times he's let me down and he's embarrassed me over and over and over again. He even looked terrible against Cortez Costa. He gassed out in the first round. He attempted some of the most miserable trip takedowns I've seen in my life. He face planted himself actually in the last 30 seconds of the first round, attempting a trip on Cortez Costa. He's just a mess. At heavyweight, I thought he could look good with his athleticism and stuff like that, but he just isn't. And the thing about Brzeski is I think Brzeski's not bad. Now, yes, he's been knocked out, 5 times in the first round now, most of those in the UFC. And yes, if you do go back into Brzeski's earlier fights before he turned out to be a naughty boy, Lukasz Brzeski was absolutely shredded, man. Like, this guy, I mean, he looked like the next Mr. Olympia at some points, man. He was a beast. But then, unfortunately, ever since then, he's looked a bit bad. And I just don't really trust Brzeski anymore to kind of beat anyone. So it's kind of one of those fights where, as much as it pains me to pick Ryan Spann because he just is so inconsistent. He's kind of like Jake Matthews in that way, where he is just such an inconsistent fighter. One day, he's looking great. The next day, he's gassing out in 3.5 minutes against Cortez Costa. And a loss that has actually aged well since Cortez Costa has somehow beaten Sergey Spivak, who kind of looked like a guy that could challenge Tom Aspinall at some point in his career, if you can believe it. But I think that Ryan Spann does knock out Brzeski, and I think he needs to do it in the first round, because if you can believe it, Brzeski is probably the one with the better cardio out of the two. And here's the thing about Jimmy Crute. Once again, I went into this fight, I saw that Jimmy Crute was a minus 250 favorite. I nearly threw up, because... why? But also, I looked into Marcin Prachnio, and here's the thing about Prachnio. I think that Prachnio is a guy that some people are going to pick as a plus 200 underdog. Now, I did it with the Caliari fight. I tried to do it with this one, but I investigated Prachnio a bit further. He got taken down multiple times by Modestas Bukauskas. He got taken down by Vitor Petrino 4 times. He got taken down by the great Felipe Lins 4 times, who is also on a 4-fight win streak right now, the great 2018 PFL champion, as well as I believe he was a champion of a promotion called Vitali, which is pretty exciting, I guess. But anyway, Felipe Lins, UFC legend, he never fights, but he did take down Prachnio 4 times, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe Prachnio can get taken down by Jimmy Crute, because that's what Jimmy Crute needs to do. The problem with Jimmy Crute is he just got a few pretty wicked knockouts. Like, he knocked out the great Sam Alvey, which was a great win at one point, and then he did knock out Modestas Bukauskas, which also is a pretty solid win and has aged well. But the problem is, the last win that he has had was when he was 24 years old. He's 29 years old now, and he still has not won a fight since. However, stylistically, if Jimmy Crute chooses to wrestle, which he should, he has been trying to wrestle in his last fights, he should be able to take down Marcin Prachnio, and his grappling genuinely is elite. This is a guy that has submitted Paul Craig, which once again is a poorly aging win, but that was a well-aging win for a long time. He submitted Mikhail Olechaychik, which, you know, Olechaychik's not a grappler, but it's still a good win. And I know I'm looking way back in the 2020s, but I do genuinely believe that Jimmy Crute, if he can take Marcin Prachnio down, he can find a submission in this matchup. Now, Prachnio's still a pretty wicked striker. Against Modestas Bukauskas, he was actually outlanding Bukauskas quite significantly before the takedowns of Bukauskas and the submission win. I believe against Devin Clark as well, he also outlanded Clark quite significantly. So from range, Prachnio still kind of got it as a rangy striker. But I do just still think with Crute, the thing about Crute is he is small for the weight class and he is a boxer. But the thing about Crute's boxing is, although he does have his chin way up in the air, just begging to get knocked out every single time he closes the distance, he still does close the distance. And I think that's going to be important against a rangy striker in Marcin Prachnio. I think that Crute gets him down, and I think he does submit him. I do hope that Crute can get a win. Now we got our boy, the former 6'6" man, Islam Dulatov. He has somehow shrunk to 6'3". I don't know how that can happen at 26 years old, but Dulatov, of course, was listed at 6'6", and now he is only 6'3". I'm not too sure how that has happened, but our boy Dulatov, he's getting smaller. Maybe he's going to be 5'10" in his next fight. I sure hope not, because he is a wicked fighter, man. I love watching Islam Dulatov fight. his fight against the Contender Series was actually ridiculous watching it back, because if you watch that fight against Middleton Antunes, now, Antunes, I know that this was a layup, but Antunes was the LFA champion at the time. Dulatov was throwing shots so hard at Antunes, he was throwing himself off balance trying to knock him out. That is how ridiculous Dulatov is as a fighter, and that's kind of what he does. Now, he does fight from range relatively well. No, I won't say he does it greatly, but he does do it relatively well. But he does come forward and does bomb away quite aggressively. He is strong in the clinch. Pulled guillotine against Will Chope. I think he's got some knees. I think he set up this win with knees in the clinch before he knocked out Sampaio. In Brave, he's got a win in Octagon, which is a promotion that I just love. In hindsight, I think he would have killed Ding Ming. So thank God Ding Ming didn't have to fight him. He's still alive today. But I do think that Dulatov is going to knock out Adam Fugitt. Now, Fugitt has my respect because he fights the guys that no one wants to fight. He fought Mike Malott when no one wanted to fight him. He fought Michael Morales when no one wanted to fight him. So I do respect him for that. The problem is, I do genuinely just think Dulatov is going to come out there against Fugitt and overwhelm him and then try and knock him out. Now, Fugitt's got very good wins on his record, even on the regional scene before he got signed. He knocked out Solomon Renfro with like 3 head kicks in a row at the start of the fight. It was ridiculous. But I do just think Dulatov, you know, is a pretty big guy. He's not going to have the range advantage here, the reach advantage, which is interesting. But it's not really going to matter, because Dulatov just crashes the distance anyway. He actually is a ridiculous fighter. And this is kind of the theme of the card, and quite a bit of a theme of fights coming up, where these aren't big name guys. I know people in the know about Dulatov, but Dulatov's not a big name guy. But he is going to fight like an absolute idiot, and he is going to put on a good fight. I think Dulatov wins. I think he does win by knockout in round number 1. And we've got another one. We've got 2 guys, actually, I could argue, that fight like absolute idiots and come forward. But the guy I was mostly referring to was Robert Valentin. I went forward and I did watch Robert Valentin's regional matchups because he has a lot of wins by submission. And I was like, maybe in these fights he's wrestling. You know, because that would be a pretty good sort of indicator to maybe pick him as a big underdog against Ateba Gautier. No, he's not. He's actually knocking these guys down and then submitting him. Against this opponent here, Pietro Panini, he knocked him down in like 30 seconds and then just proceeded to outgrapple him from there. Actually did the same thing against Panini, kind of, in the first round of their matchup as well, of the first fight. This was a rematch. He's knocking these guys down and then submitting them. He's actually not going out there and shooting takedowns and submitting them. He's just throwing down with them. But the most hilarious part about Robert Valentin's striking is he's kind of like Jimmy Crute in a way that his chin is just way up in the air. Like, he's just begging to get knocked out the entire time he's fighting. And he just kind of uses his pretty good reach advantage to his advantage and just kind of lands big shots. But he is so hittable on the feet. And that is why I think that I'm going to pick Gautier. Now, can I justify Gautier being a minus 550 favorite in this fight? I genuinely can't. Like, I can't see him being this big of a favorite and justifying the price tag outside of a wicked first round KO. And the reason why is because if you actually watch his fights against, where is it? He has a split decision loss against Glenn Williams. The cardio that he showed in this fight was terrifying, as in it wasn't very good. The takedown defense in this fight also wasn't very good. Now, I do know that he did manage to defeat the 5'8" fat middleweight Yura Naito, and yes, I do know that I did pick Yura Naito to win that matchup in that fight, but he did show good takedown defense against Naito. I just do still worry a little bit when he does take on a massive guy like Robert Valentin, who's 6'2", a big, powerful guy, and I would be willing to bet a lot of money on this, the much better pure grappler out of these 2 guys. I think that Ateba Gautier, he needs to knock out Valentin on the feet, even if Valentin maybe wrestles, because I wouldn't be too surprised if he potentially did. I think that Gautier should still be able to defend takedowns against Valentin. This is going to be a banger. This is kind of like Dulatov's fight, where it's just going to be absolute chromosomes flying throughout the octagon. These guys are going to be throwing hooks. It's going to be absolutely epic. It's going to be kind of like if Ilia Topuria fought against Max Holloway in a phone booth sort of matchup. I love it. I think that Gautier does knock him out though. And the fact that he's got a reach advantage in this fight, not good for Valentin, because of the way that Valentin likes to fight. He kind of relies on his size to not get knocked out when he throws. So I'm going to go with Gautier by KO. Personally, I don't love the price tag though. I don't think he should be that big of a favorite. And now we've got Francisco Prado. And if you guys know about Francisco Prado, you know that he is managed by my absolute boy, Martin. So I'm going to put that out there. Maybe some bias there, but Martin he's my guy. He's probably my bestie in the space, I'll be honest. So a shout out to Martin. Hopefully Martin's watching this, and hopefully I haven't scared him away. But this is a tough fight for Prado, I do think, because he is coming up, of course, from 155 to 170. We saw that in his 170 debut against Jack Matthews. And I did say it at the time, and I will say it again, I don't like the move for Prado. Now, I do understand, and I was actually told that Prado really did struggle to make 155, because he was a big guy at 155, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that he's a big guy at 170, because he was a lot smaller than Matthews in that matchup, and you could kind of tell because he really struggled to outmuscle Matthews in a lot of moments. Matthews found a lot of success in that fight in the clinch, when he was kind of able to use a genuine strength advantage over Prado, and was able to dirty box him with uppercuts in the clinch. He was able to knee him in the clinch. He was able to defend takedowns. Prado shot 6 takedowns in that matchup, I think, and only got 1 of them in the first round. So just kind of overall, Matthews had a big side advantage and it worked. And the thing about Veretennikov is, you can kind of see it in this photo. He's a big boy for 170, man. Like, he did look pretty big against Vanderford. He looked relatively big against Paulo, but Paulo's like 6'3". And then in the regional scene, man, he's just smoking these guys. But the way that he wins a lot of his fights is he kind of blitzes. He throws a lot of combinations. He doesn't necessarily kind of pick apart his opponents. Now, he did try and do that against Paulo, but on the regional scene, he does kind of wait and then blitz. And I think that that could be a definite way for him to beat Prado, which just kind of overwhelm him, because we know what Prado wants to do. Prado wants to stand and bang. Prado is a very fun fighter, but one kind of underrated aspect about Prado's game is, I wouldn't say his wrestling as it is, because his wrestling hasn't really proven to be very good in the UFC. You know, he couldn't take down Jamie Malaki off a couple of attempts. He couldn't, I don't think he attempted a takedown against Zaita, but he couldn't take down Zellhuber with a couple of attempts as well. Went 1 of 6 on takedowns against Jake Matthews. So kind of overall, the wrestling offense for Prado isn't very effective, but at least he's attempting those takedowns, and that does kind of give me some confidence when it comes to looking at Veretennikov, because Veretennikov showed against Vanderford that once he gets taken down, he has no idea how to get back up to the feet. And for that one reason, and the fact that I saw Prado get Jake Matthews down, if Prado goes into this matchup with a wrestling game plan, I do think that it would be very effective for Prado. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm very confident in Prado at all, because I'm not, but I am still going to pick Prado here. I think if anyone's going to have a cardio advantage as well, it would be Prado, the guy coming up from 155. But this is make or break for both guys. Both of these guys need this one. I think Prado gets it done, and I think he looks to wrestle like he did against Jake Matthews. And now, Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen. Kind of random matchmaking, I will admit, because Vettori, he's kind of had a little bit of a rough sort of run as of recent. Now, of course, if you do go through his career, I am trying to find something that I am not finding. He did actually have that competitive fight against Israel Adesanya early on, and then through there, we've kind of seen him go on another win streak, get another shot at Adesanya. Looked pretty bad in that matchup, I will say, but he did still find some wrestling success in that fight, and now Vettori, you know, he just didn't fight really at all, and then now all of a sudden he's been active. And it is pretty sad to say this, but it does kind of worth mentioning. I think that Vettori is going through some pretty hard times in his own personal life, which is a bit of a shame for him. I do think hope that things do get better, because as someone that has suffered loss, it is very tough and does take a long time to recover. So I do wish Vettori all the best in that sort of aspect. But fight-wise, Vettori did, of course, fight against Dolidze. That was a rematch as well, which was odd. But, you know, I guess the UFC's matchmaking does what the UFC matchmaking does. And he just didn't look that good in that fight. And the thing about Allen is, once again, like, Allen was on a run, man. Like, a lot of people were kind of hyping up Allen to maybe be the next guy that could work his way up to a title shot. And then once he got to the best guys, like Imavov and Hernandez, he just couldn't really make it happen. And, you know, I do think that he can beat Vettori in this fight. And I think he beats Vettori, if you can believe it, with the striking. Vettori striking, I think it's a bit overrated. You know, he really does get saved by his chin a lot of the times. We saw him getting absolutely smoked in moments, of course, not in the whole fight, but in moments against Jared Cannonier. And then I also think in moments as well, I mean, Roman Dolidze found success on the feet against him in both fights, actually. And this is crazy because Dulidze was just throwing overhand lefts, over and over and over again, and Vettori never adjusted to it. Never. He just never picked it up. So I just do not trust Vettori's ability to make any adjustments in fight, or even realize a very, very basic strike that has been repeated over and over and over again. And yeah, I think Allen, honestly, we know that Allen's a grappler. We know that that's how Allen has really made his way up. But Vettori's wrestling, still pretty good. He's a short, stocky guy at 185 pounds, so he's going to be tough to take down for anyone. And Allen isn't really the strongest guy. He does kind of rely on, of course, technical wrestling and a lot of trips. Maybe he could get Vettori down, but I'm actually going to pick Allen based on the striking factor to win by decision. I do think Allen gets it done in this fight. And now we can talk about a banger. We got Phillops taking on Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira. You guys know I love the Lockdog. I have been talking about the Lockdog, I think, maybe for like 3 years now? Maybe even longer. Certainly after his loss to Ali Talib, but certainly... No. Before his loss to Ali Talib, I've been talking about him. That was a very depressing moment in the Ultimate MMA history. But he then went on a nice little streak again, and he's looking so good in the UFC, man. And, you know, Ali Talib finding some success in the PFL as well. But, man, he's good. He's so good. Like, he was losing to Sapai. Well, he wasn't losing, but he wasn't looking good against Sapai, and he smoked him with one of the knockouts of the year. I think it might have gotten one of the knockouts of the year performances over Sapai. And then he, you know, just kind of come out and showed out against Ricky Simone, which is crazy. Like, he was piecing up Simone. He was looking sick. And then he beat Said Nurmagomedov. Now, I do know that some people are trying to argue that Said Nurmagomedov won this fight. I personally can't see it. Yes, Vinicius Lockdog, he lost the first round. Said Nurmagomedov found some success with some wrestling. But Vinicius Oliveira won the last 2 rounds. Oliveira outstruck him in the last 2 rounds and got takedowns in the last 2 rounds as well. Rant over. Let's talk about this matchup. Phillops. Everyone loves Phillops. You know, I've kind of been low on him as a prospect for a while, but it mostly just comes down to his fight IQ. I just don't believe that he makes good decisions in the octagon, and I also don't trust in his cardio. That cardio has kind of always been a problem for him. It was a problem 5 years ago. It's a problem today as well, I think. You know, the thing about Phillops. But he's fun, you know. He does throw a lot of spinning stuff. He does have a very, very unpredictable striking style. And recently, we've actually been seeing him mix it up with some wrestling as well. So he can do it all. The thing about this for Phillops, though, is I feel like it's a step up in competition for him, despite the loss to Rob Font, obviously, over the guys that he's been beating. I think that this is a step up in competition for Phillops. And I think it's a step down in competition for Vinicius Oliveira. I do believe that Said Nurmagomedov would beat Phillops. And MMA mathing it out, I think that Vinicius Oliveira beats him. Now, the thing about Vinicius Oliveira is there is definitely going to be opportunity for Phillops to beat him. I think you could even argue that Vinicius Oliveira could give Daniel Marcos some opportunities to beat him, because if you actually watch Oliveira's striking, my goodness, this guy is unorthodox. He's more unorthodox than Phillops. He has his hands by his waist, literally by his waist. He's throwing from his waist. And then sometimes, if you watch his Contender Series fight especially, dude, like, he's throwing these hooks from the ground, man. Like, he is just absolutely winging these shots. It is crazy what he is doing in the octagon, man. But honestly, the fact that he made it work, and he made it look so good against Ricky Simone, was able to mix in some offensive wrestling against Said Nurmagomedov, who has kind of proven to be a tough guy to take down in moments, and also has a pretty sick guillotine that he was able to avoid. I like Oliveira in this fight. I think he can get it done over Phillops. Now, maybe I was going to say maybe a hot take, but I think he's going to get it done by decision. But maybe Oliveira could finish him, because, as I said, Oliveira throws hooks from the ground. It is insane. Michael Johnson takes on Daniel Zellhuber. I honestly think this is a setup for Zellhuber to get a win over Michael Johnson, and then get a fight on the UFC Noche card coming up in September, I believe. But I don't say that to disrespect Michael Johnson. I say that just stylistically, it's not a good Michael Johnson fight. Michael Johnson, he wants to win where he can dog it out, he can close the distance, he can box up his opponents in close range, and maybe mix in some wrestling on top of that. Zellhuber's not going to give him that opportunity, because Zellhuber fights from range very well. He boxes with a lot of straight shots. He throws a lot of straight kicks up the middle by teep kicks, push kicks. And I also think that in this matchup, Zellhuber should be able to defend the takedowns of Michael Johnson. Yes, Michael Johnson's a very good wrestler. And yes, he's on a pretty good little win streak now. He beat Otman Zaitar, happens. And then Darius Flowers, who took him on short notice. But I also think now he's taken up a massive step up in competition against Zellhuber. I know Zaitar at one point was the knockout machine, but I think Zellhuber is even more dangerous than Zaitar. I think Zellhuber is even more dangerous than Darius Flowers. And I think that Zellhuber, I don't think he can knock out Johnson, but maybe he can. I wouldn't be too surprised. It's a pay-per-view main card. Zellhuber's going to be gassed up. I think he's going to be able to hurt Johnson on the feet. And I think that, honestly, just the story of this fight is Johnson's going to want to close the distance. He's going to want to make it dirty. And Zellhuber's going to want to fight from range. And I think that Zellhuber can cleanly fight Johnson from range. Of course, Zellhuber did lose to Ridovic, but that was an absolute banger, an absolute war. I think a lot of people are a little bit split on the scorecards in that fight. But, what it does tell me still is guys that can make striking tricky can make it hard for Zellhuber. Trey Ogden was able to do that, but I just don't know if Michael Johnson can. Now, don't forget, Michael Johnson did fight the greatest fighter of all time in a main event. How long ago was it when this did happen? Here it is, UFC Fight Night 138. It was overturned to a win for the GOAT, Artem Lobov, because Michael Johnson did miss weight. Artem Lobov was able to continue his undefeated streak as a 29-0. He didn't main event this fight, the card. We move on. Forget I even said that. Dan Ige fights against Patricio Pitbull. Artem Lobov, of course, I think it was against Cub Swanson he main evented. But anyway, Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbull. I am the king of spreading misinformation. I honestly think that this is a much better stylistic fight for Pitbull than, of course, it was against Yair Rodriguez. As you guys know, I did pick Yair Rodriguez to win with a lot of confidence in that fight because, as I said in that breakdown, that was stylistically the worst matchup the UFC could have possibly given Patricio Pitbull. And I honestly think that Pitbull, he gave a decent enough account for himself. But there's a little problem that I have with that fight, is that Yair Rodriguez nearly did finish Pitbull on the feet. He did hurt Pitbull quite a lot, and that was 3 months ago. Pitbull's 38 years old. The last time Pitbull had a bad performance and then come back after 3 months was against Chihiro Suzuki, who knocked him out. Now, do I think that Dan Ige can go out there and knock out Patricio Pitbull? Maybe not, because Pitbull is a tough guy, man. He's always going to hang in there. But I do think that Dan Ige can beat Pitbull. The thing about this fight, though, is if this was Patricio Pitbull's debut, I probably would be inclined to pick him to win, honestly. But I think just kind of given the fact that we've just seen Yair Rodriguez hurt Pitbull, we've just seen Pitbull look, once again, small for 145 pounds at the UFC level, I guess you could say. And Pitbull's always been a small guy. He fought at 155 as well. He was tiny as well. Like, that was kind of nuts. Like, think about it. Pitbull versus Chandler happened. Twice, I think. But anyways, Dan Ige, he looked good against Sean Woodson, man. Comically short against Sean Woodson, but Sean Woodson gave him a couple of opportunities and Dan Ige capitalized. And I did pick Sean Woodson in that matchup. I did pick Sean Woodson with confidence in that matchup. And in hindsight's always 2020. The thing that Dan Ige does best, and this is why I'm picking him to beat Patricio Pitbull, is Sean Woodson, he's a boxer, right? And Dan Ige's a boxer. And when you watch Dan Ige's fights, and you actually look into what Dan Ige does and how he has won fights in the past, it is because his opponents have tried to box with him. And Dan Ige is best at boxing. That's kind of his main sort of game, I would say. Yes, he can wrestle, but it's not something he does. He beat Damon Jackson because Damon Jackson tried to box with him. He beat Nate Landwehr because Nate Landwehr tried to box with him. He knocked out Andre Fili in the first round, but what happened? Sean Woodson, the boxer, tried to box with Dan Ige, and I know I should have seen this coming, but I didn't, because Sean Woodson's like 6'4" at 145 pounds. If you try and box with Dan Ige, you're not going to win. And what is Patricio Pitbull? He is a boxer, man. I know that Pitbull can wrestle, I know that Pitbull can grapple, but that's what he wants to do. He wants to box on the feet. Yes, he does have kicks, but at the same time, he's mostly going to try and stand and bang with Ige, and he's going to do it with a very significant reach disadvantage, which is going to give Ige and his jab and his straight punches a massive opportunity here in this fight. I think Dan Ige wins. I think Dan Ige wins by decision. Pitbull, man, like, I love Pitbull. I do. I have been a fan of Bellator. I do miss Bellator as well. Bellator was definitely the better promotion out of them in PFL. They did tournaments. The Bellator tournaments will always have a special place in my heart. But yeah, I just kind of... Danny Gay's the pick. Anyways, Trailblazer, Holland versus Daniel D. Rodriguez. I don't know why I said the nicknames, but I think Holland wins. Here's the thing about Holland, right? I've always said in the past, Holland will beat opponents that want to stand and box with him, stand and strike with him, really. But if you actually look at his last 2 fights, Gunnar Nelson didn't want to stand and strike with him. Vicente Luque kind of wanted to stand and strike with him, but Luque, of course, obviously is the Dark Knight. And guess what happened? Holland Darst the Dark Knight. Now, I know people are going to comment, oh, it's the Anaconda choke. It's similar. It's similar enough. You know? So yeah, Holland Darst the Dark Knight, or he Anaconda the Dark Knight, if you want me to be specific. And I do think in this matchup, I think he does beat an aging D-Rod. D-Rod's a boxer. He can wrestle. I guess he kind of wrestled against Magny, but he beat Alex Morono, and Morono's just a little bit flabby and just useless at 170. And then he beat Santiago Ponzinibbio, who I think's done. I just really do think Santiago Ponzinibbio's done. And I just don't think that D-Rod is going to be able to find that much boxing success against Holland. The only person that's really been able to box up Holland with a very significant amount of success was, he fights so often, he's not even here, Jack Della Maddalena. And if you watch that fight, yes, JDM found a lot of success in that matchup, but Holland was also able to avoid a lot of strikes in that fight, which is why I think a judge thought that Holland could have won the fight. But I think Holland's striking defense is solid. I think that Holland is able to avoid a lot of shots of D-Rod. He's got better movement than D-Rod. He's faster than D-Rod. I think that Holland knocks him out. Honestly, I actually do believe that Holland is going to knock out Daniel Rodriguez in this matchup. I'm sorry for the quick break in the action. I had to take a water break, as well as I need to also re-inform the public about my misinformation placed earlier about Artem Lobov main eventing a fight against Michael Johnson. He did not main a card against Michael Johnson. He main evented a card against Cub Swanson. And here's the thing about this fight. The announcer and the UFC actually accidentally read the scorecards in the wrong order. So this actually wasn't a unanimous decision win for Cub Swanson. It was a unanimous decision win for the GOAT, Artem Lobov. This is the fight before he become 29-0 against Michael Johnson. This is how he become 28-0. My king, my GOAT, Artem Lobov. Now let's get back into the co-main event. Paulo Costa takes on Roman Kopylov. I think Roman Kopylov wins. Paulo Costa's cool. He's fun. He's kind of funny on Twitter. I feel like he kind of got old very quickly on Twitter. Maybe that's just a hot take. Maybe that's just me. But, you know, Costa, not really as funny as he used to be. Kopylov, of course, is the 34-year-old prospect that we know and love in the middleweight division. And he's a good striker. Like, he's a very fun striker. Of course, in the past, the thing that Kopylov struggled with was his takedown defense. And he kind of just fixed his takedown defense and then just become goated, really. Like, I know he did lose to Anthony Hernandez, but Hernandez was a nightmare matchup for Kopylov, and I think really everyone at the time knew that. And then he took on Cesar Almeida, who's a very good striker himself, had a very close fight. He won that fight against Almeida, found a lot of success actually closing the distance in that fight against Almeida, despite Almeida being a relatively short king. And then, of course, he knocked out Chris Curtis. And Chris Curtis, of course, now back down to 170 pounds. So maybe Kopylov sent him down a weight class. Costa's had a rough one of ways. I don't know what I just said, but we're going to roll with it. Of course, he did have the split decision loss to Strickland, which kind of came out of nowhere when he took all of that time off. He beat Rockhold in that bloody mess. He lost to Whittaker, and then he lost to Strickland. So he's only been losing to the best of the best, and then even before then, he was just inactive. Like, what has Costa been doing? How has Costa been making money? I don't think Elon Musk is paying you that much, Paulo Costa, but he does actually have a very interesting sort of way to potentially beat Kopylov, because I'm going to remind you, Paulo Costa, he's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you can believe it, and maybe, just maybe, we could see Paulo Costa close the distance against Kopylov and maybe attempt some takedowns against Kopylov, because I do believe if you're going to beat him, that is how you kind of need to do it. And I know Costa's a big boy. He's a big guy for 185 pounds. Pretty big frame, kind of built like Vettori, I guess you could say. But I think that Kopylov just puts too much out there. Like, Kopylov is a pretty high volume guy at 185 pounds. And I think that Costa, he's going to be probably waiting for his moments too much. You know, the thing about Strickland is, although Strickland does just kind of jab and teep like Israel Adesanya did in his title run, you know, Paulo Costa didn't really like that from Strickland. He didn't really like the fact that Strickland was kind of always putting something out there, always putting a jab out there, That's what Kopylov does. Kopylov throws a lot of kicks. He throws a lot from range, and I think eventually he's just going to throw too much volume. He's going to overwhelm Costa, and he's going to win a decision over Paulo Costa, probably based on the later rounds. And now we've got the main event for the BMF bout. Now, do I think the BMF bout is super gimmicky? Yeah, I do, and I honestly wouldn't mind it if the UFC just kind of made it obvious that they think it's a gimmick as well, but unfortunately they try and make it out as if it's this real thing, like this big sort of deal. Personally, I think it's an excuse for the UFC to run a pay-per-view without an actual title fight on the line. Now, there really isn't a reason why I don't think you could have had Zhang Weili in the co-main event of this fight and then just did Holloway versus Poirier without the BMF belt, but it makes sense to put the BMF belt on this one here, because if Poirier was to go out there against Holloway and win the fight, then I guess he would retire as the BMF belt, and maybe that would be the end of the BMF belt, because who would defend it at that point? But of course, this is a trilogy matchup with Dustin Poirier fighting Max Holloway for the first time. If I knew how to use the internet, this would have gone a lot smoother. A long time ago, all the way back in 2012, when Max Holloway, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was only, 21 years old, or something kind of crazy like that. When Holloway was a 20-year-old, he was a youngin', he was a young up-and-comer at that point, and he did have not the best performance against Holloway to start with, but they did meet again in 2019, where he got another victory over Holloway by decision, and that was a much more competitive matchup, and Holloway, of course, did come up to 155 for that fight. Now, we do go into this one here, and I am going to pick Holloway. I think he does get one back over Dustin Poirier in this fight. I think that Holloway, when he fought against Justin Gaethje, he exceeded my expectations drastically on how he was going to look at 155 pounds. Now, I still don't think that was the fight of the night. I actually still believe that Rakic versus Prochazka was the fight of the night over Holloway versus Gaethje, but they gave it to this matchup because I guess they had a cool moment at the end. But I do genuinely believe over the 25 minutes that that fight took place, it didn't have the same excitement as what I had for Prochazka versus Rakic. But I do digress. I think Holloway wins against Poirier. As I said, he looked much improved at 155 pounds. And then he did go against Ilia Topuria. And yeah, he looked alright in the first round. You know, he did win the first round, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of people say Ilia Topuria, he took the first round off so he could then knock out Max Holloway. And, you know, he probably did, to be honest, because Ilia Topuria is the man at the moment. And unfortunately, probably is the villain to a lot of people. He's knocked out Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, and Volkanovski. Probably three of most people's favorite fighters, let's be honest. So yeah, Topuria really making a name for himself, and honestly, I don't think anyone beats Topuria anytime soon. And the winner of this fight, if it is Holloway, maybe we see Topuria knock him out again, I don't know. But yeah, I do think that Holloway beats Poirier. Now, Poirier did have a very good performance, I thought, against Islam Makhachev. Showed incredible takedown defense after the first round, showed pretty good striking, of course, after the first round, and towards the end of the fight, you know, where Makhachev was able to get the submission very late in the 5th round, but that was kind of when Poirier was a bit tired. He kind of had gassed out, but the reason why I do believe Poirier was gassed out on that fight was because he had to defend so many takedowns from Makhachev, and, you know, I just don't think that Holloway is going to be putting that wrestling pressure on Poirier at all, to be honest, like Makhachev was. I think this is going to be a striking fight. I think this is going to be a fight where both guys are going to spend most of the time on the feet. And if anyone's going to attempt a takedown in this fight, it probably would be Dustin Poirier. But given that it's Dustin Poirier's retirement fight, and this is just me putting the tinfoil hat on in this one here, I think that Dustin Poirier is not going to want his retirement fight spent wrestling Max Holloway for 25 minutes. I do believe that Poirier is probably going to be wanting to go out on his career like, I guess Justin Gaethje kind of did against Holloway, where he's going to be standing and boxing against Holloway in this matchup, and I think that is kind of why I like Holloway in this matchup. Holloway has incredible cardio if the fight goes 25 minutes, which I think it will, because despite Holloway getting the knockout over Gaethje, Holloway isn't really necessarily known for big sort of power, big one-punch power, and maybe we could see another sort of situation where Holloway pieces up his opponent, and Poirier kind of falters towards the later ends of the later ends of the fight. But I do think that we are going to see Holloway go out there and win a decision. over Dustin Poirier. I had KFC, alright? Forgive me, alright? The Zinger Stinger, it's too good of a deal. It's $15, right? Poirier, I think that, yeah, I just think Holloway wins. It's kind of, I think he wins by decision. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you like this pay-per-view? I've seen a lot of people, a lot of Dana defenders defending this on Twitter. I mean, the main card, I think the main card is weak for a pay-per-view, right? Like, I think you can justify this. I think you can justify this. I think you can justify this. But I just don't really think the rest is like super pay-per-view sort of quality. And the prelims are fun, but there's no name value on the prelims. And I know that you don't really need name value on the prelims. A lot of sort of more casual fans aren't really watching the prelims, but still, give us something, you know? Yeah, but like, you know, like when Artem Lobov was around in the UFC, the cards were stacked because they had to stack them, or else Artem Lobov wasn't going to fight for them, you know? But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.